Pratap and Sagar team for giving me this opportunity to share some of my confusions and doubts and information that I have with me. I have found it very difficult to communicate the 10 years of learning that I have had living with forest dwellers. I will not use the technical terms that I use today, which is Adivasis, indigenous, and I will discuss these terms by and by. But literally, I have lived with forest dwellers for several years, in which a lot of things changed within me. I learned a new language, and to learn the new language it took me at least 3 to 4 years. And I went there basically to do my doctoral thesis from the School of Economics in sociology. And the terms and conditions of this doctoral thesis were very, very interesting. My mentor, Ashish Nandi and Professor Uroy, indirectly and directly told me that there are 3 things that you need to do if you want to do a doctoral thesis with us. Never directly, but in the course of conversations, this is the message that I got. The first is that you have to learn a new language. Second, you have to learn the new language without a mediator, without an informant, without a translator. And third, your thesis is complete when your ideas are mature. In the same way as a papaya or a mango falls down from a tree when it's ripe, similarly your thesis will fall down once your ideas are mature, and it doesn't really matter how long you take. 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, we don't know how ideas mature. So that's the basic 3 rules that I had to follow in order to do my thesis. And I began to search for a place where I can go. I did not follow conventional methods in anthropology, which is that you do a proper survey of the areas that you want to go to, you collect some data, and you, like you do in war, you then charge and you move on to the place where you want with some basic information. My course of action, my course of movement was basically determined by a very simple question. And the question was, how do we know the finality of development and the world that we live in? Critically, we can't know it because there's arguments for and against it. The only way we could do it is find out a place where there were no development inputs. And by that we mean simply there is no electricity, there is no water, there are no development programs, there is no irrigation. And how was one to find such a place? Common sense told me that such a place would be really a backward place because that's how these places are classified. A backward place is one where there is none of these. So you start to look for backward places. And somebody, in the course of begin conversation, somebody said, why don't you go to Bastar? So I went to Bastar. And in Bastar, the only thing I told people was, I want to learn a new language. And that's why I'm here. So everybody directed me to the right man who would teach me the new language. And by a lot of errors and mistakes and a lot of hard work, and I can't go into the details because it's a very long story, I landed up in a place called Ahuzmar. So somebody said, oh, you need that place? That is a place where you will find nothing. People still live in loincloths, अभी पत्ते के कपड़े पहन के घूमते हैं, बस तुमको वही जगह तुम्हारे लिए बढ़िया है, तुम वहाँ चले जाओ. So I made my journey to Ahuzmar. And it was not a simple journey because I could not enter Ahuzmar because it was a protected place. And it was not biosphere reserves, any nature reserve that you have today. It was not a sanctuary, it was not a biosphere reserve, none of these. I had to go to the Home Department in Bhopal. Swamiji, who was a great painter at that point in time, had just started to make the Bhopal Bhavan. And he blessed me saying that you please go.
Jagdish Swaminathan.
J. Swaminathan. He was a painter, he was starting the Bhopal Bhavan, and he had just visited the outskirts of Ahuzmar. And he said, you please go, and you have my blessings. You were wonderful people. I was very encouraged and I landed up there. And I stayed there for 5 years. Because the rule of my research was that I don't need an interpreter. And the politics of the interpreter is very simple and straight. What they will tell me and what they will translate, I have no way to take. they will sift out information, they will translate words wrongly. Therefore, the idea was to learn a new language, you have to get to the sensibility of the word. You have to understand the phonetics of the word, you have to get the texture of the word in order to know the nuances of what the word actually means, more than the literal translation. I think that was the methodological principle that I followed when I learned the language. It took me about 3 years to learn the language, and then 2 more years to get into the depth of what it is. And my problem was very simple. How do the people living in the forest think of the forest? What is the theory of the forest? And the only way I could do that is to see a reflection of this theory in the practices that they do. And I would say that I was told to ask them the theory, and I thought that was the wrong way of doing it, because in their tradition, this mode of knowledge, of question and answer, is not their mode of acquiring knowledge. And I think that's a very fundamental difference between our way of acquiring knowledge and their way of acquiring knowledge. How do they do it? We'll come to it as we go along. So I stayed there for 5 years and I learned the language. And I learned several things in their language. And the problem that I faced was to translate my thinking, which was now in their language, into first normal Hindi or English, and then into conceptual language of anthropology. And I have failed miserably to do that. I've written a few articles, and what I'm going to tell you today is also with great difficulty, because I still do not have the right vocabulary to say what I want to say, but I'll try nevertheless. One of the things that I tried to do here was to learn about plants. And I did not want to learn about plants using modern botany. So I did not want to go and look at the different kinds of leaves there are, different kinds of flowers there are, whether it is a monocotyledon or a dicotyledon. I just didn't want to learn the vocabulary. I wanted to learn the plants the way they would want to teach me plants. And I didn't succeed. In the course, several things and several questions have come to my mind, some of which I'm going to share today. I will come to that knowledge subsequently, because I think we need to travel a certain amount of intellectual distance in order for me to make sense to you. I need to do a little bit of decommissioning of some of the thoughts that we have about these people in order to make you available to some of my ideas. It may be unnecessary for a lot of people, but I think it would be necessary in order to background my information and understanding in some appropriate way. First thing I notice is that knowledge comes to them without physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics. And that was very, very fascinating for me. How does a body, how does a people actually acquire this knowledge without the basic sciences? I have tried this question at many forums after I came to Delhi, with many scientists, with conservators of forests, with botanists, and the only answer I got was that it is basically hit and try. My little reading of history and philosophy of science and practices of science also tells me that they also have a method of hit and trial. Only thing is that they document the hit and trial in some measurable, documented form, where we call probabilities. They know how to document it, they know how to study it, and therefore they have this power of the document in order to say. So I thought that was not a valid reason to accept that this is basically hit and trial. What they meant was this is accidental. And my contention is that no, it is not accidental. There is a method to it. And that method we have to call out as academics. There is a method in everything that we do, and everybody is not self-conscious of the method which they follow in generating the knowledge that they have. The whole idea of social sciences actually emerges from this possibility of actually being able to reflect on everyday practices in order to derive principles which you use and create a specialized body of knowledge which we call the scientific knowledge. So I kept running with that question, and then came the intellectual property right regime. And there is no mention in that regime of the process of discovery. That regime totally neglects or overlooks or willfully undermines the possibility that there is a method to this discovery, and that method needs to be honored, and that method needs to be included in the intellectual property right regime. Why do they not recognize this method is the question, which I will address, but one more point of fact. We need to ask this question for one other very important reason. On record by botanists is the fact that we only know 1/20th or 1/100th of the knowledge of the biodiversity that exists in fact. The question is, does modern science have the equipment, both intellectual and technological, to actually research the 99% of the knowledge that they don't have? And what guarantee do we have that they do have that expertise? I will describe to you very shortly what modern science does and why is it not capable of doing it, and why therefore it is very important for us to understand and recognize and accept that there is a method in Adivasi ways of looking at the plant world. And I think this is a very difficult question, because most people will not even want to recognize this question, that this is even a valid question. Because there are a whole lot of presuppositions which we have been socialized into, which we are not willing to get rid of. If we don't get rid of those presuppositions, it is not possible even to recognize that this is an important question. To accept that this is an important question means at least three things. That they did find out, we have to accept that there is a method to find out, and that the method is learnable, and that modern science has not been able to do it. If we accept this question, we have to accept these three subsequent substitutory propositions. Only then can we actually agree to talk about this. If somebody tells me, as some people have, you first prove to me that they have knowledge, then we start to discuss. I don't think that's the way it can go. We have to first accept that there is a body, there is a methodology. Once this is acceptable, then we can begin the discussion. Otherwise, there is no scope of a discussion at all. With that, I come to the point. This is therefore an exercise not only to prove that Adivasis have a method, but to also study the method of sciences as well. This is a very important point, because unless we include this discussion in not generating knowledge as recorded, but as a method, as a problem of method, this discussion will not go any further. And when I say it's a problem of method, what I'm trying to say is that method is not only concerned in generating knowledge which we can use, method is also concerned with examining itself in terms of its appropriateness and reliability in the task that it assigns itself to do. For instance, we need to ask how appropriate are the methods that are available to us in the tasks that we want them to perform. This is a very important discussion in natural sciences, but not in social sciences. Instrumentation is a very important branch of natural sciences, where they will create a new instrument each time they want to go deeper. Right? And there is a whole lot of proof of it. That every time we want to know something deeper, you look at the Higgs boson. Look at the huge machine that they have created in order to study particle physics. Right? I think this is not the monopoly of natural sciences. This is a problem of methodology which extends across all sciences. So my concern here is that what is it in the method that is lacking, which prevents us from recognizing that there is a method in the Adivasi way of looking at the plant world. I'm only talking on the plant world. I'm not talking about nuclear physics. I'm not talking about cancer. I'm not talking about Mars. I'm just talking about one limited area of knowledge, which is the plant world and the human body. Right? It would be unfair to expect Adivasis to talk about nuclear physics. Only then can you recognize that there is a method in what they say. I think that's a very unfair demand, and it does not stand to any kind of merit. Having said that, few small points about what is the method of the sciences and what is the problem with these methods, which cannot lead us to understand or even consider this question far apart, get into understanding what this knowledge is all about. I want to describe to you first the whole politics of creating biosphere reserves or reserves of nature that we have today, and then link it to the whole question of ethnobotany the whole question of 5th and 6th schedules, to the whole question of Forest Rights Acts 2006 and to PESA 1996. I think this is part of a larger package which shares the same methodology and which derives from a particular view of method given to us by one particular version of what constitutes to be science and reason. The first thing about biodiversity reserves or reserves of nature is that it's a creation of capital for a very, very specific reason. The rate or the speed at which industrial production happens is astonishingly fast, because that's the nature of the technology and that's the nature at which capital needs to reproduce itself. Accordingly, what happens is that the rate at which nature can regenerate itself is not as fast. So if they continue to extract at that speed, very soon nature will not be able to keep up with that pace. Nature has a different rhythm altogether. How do you bridge this gap? So what you do is you create biosphere reserves. You create nature reserves, which are called biosphere reserve, wildlife sanctuaries, etc. Where what you do is you encircle, you territorialize natural capital and say this is the preserve and the property of the state. And what will it be used for? A new science is created in order to get the information that they want about plants. And that science is called ethnobotany. What does ethnobotany do? Ethnobotanists basically go to the indigenous people across the world, go to the Adivasis in India, collect all the information that they have about plants. So typically a ethnobotanical experience is that on the one hand you will have local names, on the other hand you will have Latin names, and on the third hand you will have a third column which tells you what it is used for, and the fourth column, maybe some anthropologists have contributed to that, you will have folklore, mythologies, culture, where this plant is used. What do they do with this knowledge? They take this knowledge to the laboratory, they test it out in the laboratory, and what do they do in the laboratory? They extract the active principle, which is a formula. They preserve the active principle, try it on species, find it to be efficacious, and patent it. This is what ethnobotanists do. Ethnobotanists will not ask the question, where did you get this knowledge from? How did you generate this knowledge? What are the principles of nature that you observe? What categories do you use? They cannot ask this question because in modern science there is no scope for asking these questions. A scientist will not even entertain these questions because one, he does not have the conceptual equipment to do it. Two, if he accepts this question, he has to accept that he can't do it. And that breaks the monopoly of modern science. Totally. They will never accept this question. Right? In fact, if you push them too hard, they'll say, look, why do you want them to remain primitive? Why do you want them to remain backward? You know, what is this? You don't want them to grow, you don't want them to benefit from modern society, the benefits of good civilization you have taken, you're not giving it to them. And the discussion ends there. So this is what ethnobotany does. And a good variation of ethnobotany, which the government of India has propagated very, very strongly, is to make biodiversity registers. It is of no value to the Adivasi. He only has a book, right? And what is the book doing? The book is making available all the information that you need to a multinational corporation who would then know where to go to identify that plant. What does Adivasi do with that? Nothing. He just is very proud. Look, now I have a documentation of so many species in my forest. Right? But if you ask this Adivasi, if you ask this tribal, then can you now tell me how do you produce it? He cannot. Right? And this is something that I want to discuss now and tell you who are these Adivasis who have this knowledge. As a friend journalist who is sitting here who pointed out to me, well, there are only Adivasis, only tribals. And I insisted there are two different sets of people. In English, we translate Adivasi into tribal, but it's only a translation. If you look at the historical epistemologies of these three words, Adivasi, indigenous and tribal, they are very, very different epistemologies. So who is a Adivasi and who is a tribal? A little bit on that. The Adivasi to me is a forest dweller who lives in the forest. who thinks that the forest is his home and his place of work. A tribal is someone who has forest dwellers as his ancestors and who has moved out of the forest and has become part of a mainstream civilization over several hundred years. The fifth and sixth schedule are part of that project, the entire project, to make them part of the modern world. Fifth and sixth schedules have inherited the legacy of excluded and partially excluded areas which the British made. What were these areas and how did they come into existence? Adivasis, the forest dwellers, were the first to protest against the exploitative forest policies of the British. This is on record. What did the British do? The British argued. The British were now, enlightened people. So they could not rule brutally. They had to rule with a humanity. So they brought all the theories of anthropology that they learned from one strain of anthropology. And that, I want to repeat that, there are other strains of anthropology also which they did not learn from. These strains come from anarchists who had a completely different idea of anthropology than from anthropologists that supported the mainstream and exploitative systems. And they said, look, they are very innocent people, they are beautiful people, they are lovely culture, they are wonderful, but they are not ready for modern civilization. Right? And therefore they created these special areas. Politically looked at, this was the first counter-insurgency measure. Why? Because this was a measure to stop the Adivasis from any further rebellion and protest. My argument is the fifth and sixth schedule is a counter-insurgency measure. It is not a measure for development. The FRA 2006 and the PESA 1996 inherit that legacy and they are equally counter-insurgency measures. They are not measures designed to develop people. And there is a very important angle. Anything that is designed as a counter-insurgency measure, the first thing it does is to make sure that your voices and your agency is squashed. Unless then it cannot be a counter-insurgency measure. This entire tradition is designed to squash initiative. And then do what? You first have to accept that you are primitive and then you can become a member of the fifth and sixth schedule. What does it do?